everyone. We know at least one more member of the board will be joining us, so we want to start though, since we do have a quorum now. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm calling the August 8th, 2018 Village of Ossining Zoning Board of Appeals public hearing to order. I ask that you please turn off your cell phones. For those in the audience, please do not engage in activities that will distract the board or the applicants or their respective representatives. Please do not engage in loud or extended conversations during the proceedings. Any conversations by audience members should be conducted outside the hearing room. At the end of the applicant's presentation, the public will be given the opportunity to speak on relevant issues involving the application. I want to welcome Tracy Corbett. She is our new Director of Planning and Development to the Village of Ossining. Welcome, Tracy.
Thank you.
And as you know, we started this several months ago, but I just want to put a reminder out there that we have given a lot of thought to the policies and procedures concerning the Zoning Board of Appeals for the Village of Ossining, effective now, immediately. We will no longer accept incomplete applications. We take responsibility for the current system, but I think we have now worked ourselves out of that since it's been going on now for like 3 or 4 months. Each applicant will have a pre-application meeting as well as additional meetings to confirm that your application is complete. All the I's dotted and the T's crossed. And you must follow the calendar to start the process. You don't bring paperwork to the meeting. You follow all your paperwork has to be in by certain dates. Those calendars are on the webpage, and we expect them to be followed. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to start our meeting tonight. We will start with our ZBA 0218 49 Spring Street Corporation, looking to build a building.
Good evening.
Good evening.
JBR Hernandez, architect.
I'm going to ask you because there's a camera back there that she's videotaping this, so thanks. Thanks, guys.
I think we have presented the project already. You're familiar with it. I know that some additional information has been provided for the aqueduct, a reference to the aqueduct. And I don't know if the board at this time has any more questions, anything we can
Well, I'm not sure whether any of the participants does, but Corporation Counsel?
We did, and thank you, Madam Chair. And
Is your mic on?
it is. And Tracy and I had a brief opportunity to discuss this, and I think, Brian, you're familiar with this application as well. The one issue, and I do want to thank Mr. Corky because he was good enough to provide a number of documents, Walker's Guide to the Old Croton Aqueduct, various maps, as well as the management plan for the Old Croton Aqueduct State Historic Park through Westchester County. As the board is aware, the application here is for variances for parking and setback from the Old Croton Aqueduct to construct a new 4-story mixed-use building on Spring Street. The building would have 12 apartments and 2 retail spaces at street level. The issue that we have, and I will just say this, I'm not certain that the documents provided necessarily answer, relates to our section 270-37 of our code, which does have a provision in it dealing with setbacks from the Old Croton Aqueduct. I did, as I said, have a discussion with our planner, and I know that there is some issue that has been presented by the applicant as to whether the area that is behind the building at 49 Spring Street is in fact the aqueduct, and rather than does it in fact go along Spring Street. But in my conversations, particularly with the planner, we're talking about the trail, and the trail is certainly what goes behind 49 Spring Street. And while we do have the setback, and I believe it points here out here that the 25-foot strips of land immediately adjacent to and on both sides of the aqueduct property shall be considered buffers, and that's defined in the statute. And then the portions of the 50-foot wide regulated area may be utilized for activities which comply with the chapter if at the discretion of the reviewing authority, that would be this board, it has been demonstrated by the applicant that such activities will not adversely impact the Old Croton Aqueduct property. The plans that it provided indicate no setback, that in fact there is a portion of the building that would be directly on what we believe to be the trail. And that, while there may be some ability for this board through an area variance to vary the amount of the buffer, there is nothing that is presented in these plans. So, and I want, Bob, I want to thank you for sending all that stuff over and reviewing it. I don't know if there's anything else that the applicant can provide which would indicate anything more in terms of that either one, this is not the aqueduct, but we all view it as the trail. That's what we've all viewed it as. And I think we've had that discussion before. But that, I think, is the biggest sticking point. You know, I know I have, and I've, as I said, discussed with the planner, and I know we've had prior discussions with the ZBA at the earlier issues here, relates to, in fact, what that setback is, particularly at that location where, as everyone knows, it literally will cut right across the back of where that building is. So, and Bob, I know we'd had discussions before as to, there were some statements, although not in writing, from folks who were affiliated with the Aqueduct Commission relating to this particular location, and I looked at the maps, but I think that's, you know, from my perspective as Corporation Counsel and advisor to this board, the biggest concern in terms of the setback and the lack of setback for this particular location, given its closeness to the aqueduct, and also something that that Tracy has pointed out. This likely will require, when it goes to the planning board, a referral to the county because of its relationship to what is essentially a state park. And so, but that's a planning board issue to get there at that point. But right now, at least, you know, we're talking about the setback. And, you know, Bob, that I'm just giving you my concerns, having read all the documents that you were good enough to provide.
Thank you. Robert Corky, 11 Lakeview Road, attorney for the applicant. I don't disagree with Mr. Kahan that the trail is the trail, and the aqueduct per se, the actual old historic aqueduct, is separate and apart from the trail at many places between the aqueduct itself and New York City, and that's shown on the maps that I provided to the board. There are places where it's not related at all, and in fact, the tour guide that I did send to you, if you take a quick look at page 9, if you are going to take a walk down across the aqueduct, they take it from Maple to Spring and then back up to Waller. They don't even walk on that part of the aqueduct. However, there's no way to disregard the fact that that is the trail. One of the things that I did, I walked the trail. I walked it for many years. I had a home on Audubon Drive that abutted the trail for many years. I did provide at a prior meeting some pictures to the board. The pictures showed that part of the trail behind the subject property between Waller and Maple. Now, if in fact the intent was to keep that as a trail for the village and the residents, and there was some continuity with that or consistency in that's implementation, I could agree with Mr. Kahan a little more. But when I went there, I saw that, in fact, as I sent in a prior picture, there's a gate on Waller Avenue that's locked that precludes anyone from using it. And I went down there 2 weeks ago, and someone actually cut a hole in the gate to get through it, and I just would let you know that. Somebody can get hurt, hung up on that, and if they came to me, I know what I would do with that. So I just throw that out there. I took 4 other pictures that I submitted to you, which show that, in fact, it's not a maintained area. It's refuse on it, trees. So it's not, if in fact the intent of the zoning requirement was to have a trail that was accessible and usable by the residents, I would think that there would be a different implementation of that regulation, in that it would be differently maintained. I did have conversation with one of the planning board members, I apologize, I don't recall his name. His understanding of when that legislation was implemented was that they didn't want some construction to take place, a foundation or some other excavation, which would in fact possibly damage the historic actual aqueduct. So they had a setback requirement for it. There's nothing about recreation, walking, usage, or any other part on that. And in fact, if you walk, you know that you cannot walk continuously along the trail. It does take different directions, and if you go across Waller, you wind up in the fire department. The trail doesn't exist any longer. So I don't think that the intent, and again, I'm speculating. It doesn't say in the statute what the exact purpose of the setback is. It's interpretive. It doesn't say trail. It says the aqueduct in the statute. That I think it's interpretive. I don't think it's black letter law to say that, in fact, that the setback is from the trail. I think that is something that you'd have to look at the usage of the trail, how the town has enforced that statute, and what, in fact, not the town, but the village has enforced it and utilized the space. So it's my opinion, I'll differ with Stuart on that, in that the setback has to do with disturbance of the actual historic Croton Aqueduct and not anything that would occur by a building abutting the actual space. Because if you do, in fact, if you have walked, I'm sure many of you have, along the aqueduct, you'll see that there are buildings that abut it. You'll see that there is concrete across part of it. You'll see that there are walkways. Senior housing has a little park area over it. It's not a natural environment at all. It does change. I don't know, someone mentioned something about what happened at Avalon in reference to that. I don't know how the village handled that with the setbacks and whatever. I just don't know. But they asked me about that at the time at the planning board. So I do disagree with the interpretation that Mr. Kahan's suggesting. I think that the statute references the actual historic aqueduct and not, in fact, the trail.
Let me just also point this out, Madam Chair. One of the, although not specifically requested, although it is in essence implied through what has just been said, is one of the things that this board has the authority to do is in fact interpret sections of the zoning code. 270-48, it goes into that, and it's on appeal from an order, requirement, decision, or determination made by an administrative official or on request by any official, board, or agency. The village, the ZBA can do the following. One is to determine the meaning of any portion of the text of this chapter or of any condition or requirement specified or made under the provisions of this chapter, which would be conceivably making an interpretation of section 270-37, which is a section relating, what is meant in terms of the Old Croton Aqueduct property and the setback requirements that are on there. Although we don't have a formal denial here, the fact of the matter is effectively it's requesting an interpretation of the particular section, based upon that. And I understand Mr. Corky's interpretation, and I got that. We have two different interpretations there in terms of what it is, and specifically what is meant by, that particular, the language here that deals with, that the 25 feet are to be considered as buffers for the Croton Aqueduct property. So one possibility is this board, and I know we have 4 members now, good evening, Mr. Colasso, is that one of the things that the board could consider is considering a possible interpretation of the section 270-37 to see exactly where it comes in, because I think what we've got is we clearly have differing views as to what it means, as to where it comes in, and exactly what it means. I think we all agree that the trail is there. The question is, what does it mean in this case? Because the plans are clear that there is no setback at all. That building will in fact be right up against that portion of the trail. So,
I have always, interpreted, could you tell us what other communities, is there a 25-foot setback on the aqueduct?
I actually don't know
Okay.
what it is going
Because
up
I've
and
always
down
thought it was
that.
all the way up and down, because I've walked the whole aqueduct
Right.
twice,
It
so.
is, I'm not, well, the setback is actually from the property of the right-of-way of the
Right.
Croton
Right.
Aqueduct, which
Right.
is on the National Register of Historic Places.
Right.
It's-
I did check with several of the neighboring towns. There's no other town that has a setback requirement that I came across between Yonkers and the aqueduct itself. And also, I don't mean to just be argumentative and Stuart, but that's what attorneys do.
I'm used to it, go ahead.
There you go. I hate to be an originalist here, Stuart, but I think you'd have to go back, I don't know if the board does keep records of the intent of when they pass legislation like this. So I think you'd have to really go back, and I didn't know the date that this was passed, I couldn't tell, to see if in fact there was discussion and what that discussion was and what was the purpose. And if the purpose was in fact to protect the historic Croton Aqueduct, I think that limits what the interpretation of the statute would be. If on the other hand, the discussion or the intent of the statute was to preserve a right-of-way for walking, then I lose. But I think that would be required, that would be before any final decision can be made.
And I think, Madam Chair, the zoning code was passed in 2009 when in connection with the comprehensive plan. There are, extensive notes and records with regard to that. And what I do not know, and I would have to check, is if in prior codes, there was a comparable section that existed then.
I think it was.
And it may well be in the proceeding, but in any event, we can go back and look at that, and that's something I can certainly, report on, Tracy and I can look at to see exactly where that is.
Thank you. Thank
Okay, there's the other variance that you're looking for is for parking, because you don't want to have any parking.
We
So
have no way.
you have no other, you just think that you should have parking, right?
No, we have no way of providing parking.
Okay.
There is a curb cut. To provide a curb cut, will be relocating the whole bus. There's a.
But I'm
bus
just
stop
saying,
there.
you're not allocating for parking at all.
No, there is no way to
That's the other, variance that you're looking for.
So we should put this off.
Yes. Is there anyone here that's here to speak on 49 Spring? So I think we should adjourn this till we get more information. And thank you for your comments, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we can go on from there. Okay.
I think we'll not receive it.
Let's move on to our new business of the board, ZBA 1318, 2 Scarborough Circle. Request the applicant is seeking an area variance for the rear yard setback for a deck.
Good evening, Donald LeBlanc on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Samba for this deck
Could you
application.
give us your address and could you?
I'm from 72 Larry's Lane, Pleasantville, New York.
Thank you, sir, and do you promise to tell the truth under perjury? Question. These other guys have been here like 5 times already, so. So
Cross
just
my
say
heart.
yes and we can move on.
Cross my heart, yes.
We'll put this up on the screen.
Can you put 2 Scarborough up on the screen?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I don't see it.
There it is.
Oh, you're,
Oh,
they're controlling the, sorry. Good try there. Take pictures?
With respect to the application, when we put this application together, the only survey we could find did not show much in the respect of driveways, walkways, decks, or what have you. And the letter that we gave you with the statements that the homeowner has made as to these decks being there when they purchased the home. They purchased the home in '74, and if I could have you look at this, I'll just bring one over here and one over here. This is a survey from
You did that
1970.
survey before, right?
4 years prior to them purchasing the house, that shows the decks and the stairs at the back of the house.
Mhm.
That's just to give credibility to the statements we submitted. Tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Okay. And what are they doing, just leave it?
Yes, that's it.
Correct, yeah, just the legalization, and it was a complete application, it is as shown, all the dimensions are correct.
It's just a pop.
Well, we submitted this for a building permit because it's rotted, and then when we made the application, Joe told us that we'd be coming to see y'all. So here we are.
So the new deck is gonna be the exact dimensions of the old deck?
Within inches.
Okay. Okay.
You saw the pictures, there's nothing
Yeah.
about the structure that's there that would be conceived as being safe for
Right.
their use, so it needs to have something done.
I wanted the folks to know that we were gonna rebuild it, so. they're safe.
Well,
Yeah.
we did mail out all the letters to the neighbors.
did?
I don't know if anybody's here, but we have one person from the neighborhood that has given us a letter to bring tonight.
Okay, you wanna give it to the clerk? Is there anyone else here that's here to talk about 2 Scarborough Circle and the rebuilding? Yes, sir. Could you come up to the mic, please?
My name is Steve Bavaro. I live at 170 Revolutionary Road. It's considered Scarborough's village of Ossining.
Right.
We're immediate neighbors, have been for 21 years, have absolutely no objection to their changes or rebuilding of the deck.
Right.
I didn't put it in writing.
No, you don't have to put it in writing, yeah, you came. Is there anyone else here to talk on 2 Scarborough Circle? This is a pretty cut and dry, simple request. And the variances that he's looking for, his variance sheet is correct.
We have a motion in order to close the public hearing on this.
We have a motion? Yes, yeah.
I'm making a motion to close
Okay.
the public.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have a motion to approve the 2 Scarborough Circles.
Make a motion to approve the variance for 2 Scarborough.
Do you have a second? Marcel? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
CBA 14-18, this is for, I'm sorry, 14-18, yeah, 36 Water Street. I just wasn't looking for the name. I was looking for the name. So this particular project, I know that public hearing notification was sent out by your firm, sir, right? And you are?
Madam Chair, good evening. Brad Schwartz from Zarin Steinmetz, 81 Main Street, Suite 415, White Plains, and I promise to tell the truth.
Yeah, good, I'm glad you do. But this is the first time, and I read your letter and it said this board should be well aware of this project, and it is not. This is a very, very new board. So we want to use tonight more as an introduction, so you can introduce yourselves, introduce the project, and also this is special counsel. There's special counsel on this project, right? Okay. So and I apologize to the people, because I know there's people here that have come out for a public hearing, but it will let you make comments at the end, but there'll be another public hearing on this, because this is really for us, more for our other members on the board. This is something that we have not seen before, and it is a uniquely, it's not something that's easily taken care of. Okay.
Great. Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I am prepared tonight, I did prepare a presentation to provide an overview to the
Thank
board
you.
of the project. We are here tonight to introduce the requested interpretation and area variances, and I should say right off the bat, no action or vote is asked of the board tonight, and in fact, legally, Steve will tell you, you cannot act tonight because the planning board has not completed the secret process, so.
We would have told you that too, so, yes.
Wanted to make sure everyone in the room was.
Yes,
was-
thank you,
was-
sir,
was
for
crystal
understanding
clear.
that. So,
So he-
because I know we do have, because you sent out a letter about it being a public hearing, and it's more of an introduction.
Introduction, correct. So this is the current version of the building. It's 6 stories. I should mention, by the way, I'm joined this evening by Nick and Peter Saladas of Plateau Associates, the applicant for the project. 6 stories, brick, stucco, glass, 6 stories above a garage with some outdoor parking. This is the north face of the building. So as mentioned, the purpose of tonight is to introduce the application. There are two, well, there's one application for an interpretation in the alternative and area variance, and then second, there's a straight area variance application. The first is an interpretation that an area variance is not required under Village Law 7-736 and the Village Zoning Law comparable 270-43C. That section, members of the board, involves what type of street gives access to a project. Public, private, on an official map. There are 2 requirements under that section. One is that access to a street must be placed on an official map, and secondly, that street must be suitably improved to the satisfaction of the planning board. We have a disagreement as to whether or not a private street, a privately owned street, satisfies that 2-part test, and that's where the interpretation comes in, and if your board disagrees with us, then we seek an area variance in the alternative. Secondly, there's no interpretation required with respect to zoning law section 270-28F. That requires a 25-foot setback from a watercourse. So there's no interpretation. We know we need an area variance, and that application has been made. So those are the 2 requests. We're also here again to give a project overview. So the project involves 137 rentals, 14 or 10% would be affordable, a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units. I mentioned 6 stories. The project would be LEED Gold certifiable. There will be many discussions with the planning board with respect to that. 193 parking spaces, 46 in the surface lot, 147 in the garage. The building will be located on the previously developed flat area of the site. That was in an effort to try to minimize disturbance and protect and preserve views. And this project.
So, just so the people
Sure.
that have been through this process, because this has been going on for many, many, many years, there's nothing up on the plateau?
There's no development proposed in the plateau. A
I
previous.
just want people to
Yep.
realize that.
An earlier version, going back to 2008, did propose development on the plateau, and so now the project has evolved over time in response to planning board comments, public comments. There's no development on the plateau at this time, and all the density of the project is consolidated in the formerly previously disturbed area of the site. That's the on-site improvements. The project also involves off-site road improvements to what's referred to as North Water Street and the North Water Street extension, and that will tie into the variance that we'll discuss in a little bit. Real quick, procedural status. Over the past couple of months, the planning board has been conducting joint public hearings on the FSEIS, the final supplemental environmental impact statement, as well as the site plans. You'll see the public hearings have occurred over May, June, July. The continuation of the hearing will be on August 28th. I should also mention that all the site plans for the project, the draft FSEIS, and the SWIP, the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, have all undergone extensive review by the planning board and the village's consultants. Mr. Hildenbrand is here tonight. He could weigh in as appropriate and attest to the extent of his review. But there have been numerous comment letters by Kellogg Sessions. We've responded, and we think that the process before the planning board is hopefully nearing an end. This is just an overview of the building. You see, again, 6 stories above a garage. Here's the parking at the surface lot. This is the north side and the main entrance here. The road, which is off the screen, will come in this way, and then this is the entrance into the lot. There's a pool area for the residents of the project, green roof, some retaining walls on the east side, with landscaping is also shown. So this is just a sort of.
Is that a ground level swimming pool?
It's not ground level, it's with the first story.
Be rough in a flood.
You mentioned flood, so
Yeah.
the building has been designed outside of the floodplain, I believe it's at elevation 15. The roadway improvements also have been designed in accordance with fire department requirements to make sure that it accommodates the current FEMA mapping. So all floodplain issues have been studied, addressed, calculations have been provided, and I believe that Brian and his firm is comfortable with the floodplain analysis that's been provided.
Right, yeah, and the building is completely out of the 100-year flood zone.
Get
It's,
out of here. Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's up, as you approach the building, you climb in elevation.
So it's already built up? You know, it's already higher than the, because here's the railroad tracks, right?
Right.
And here's the building.
The whole building,
Okay. Because the building's not up on the plateau.
no, but just the way that the topography lends itself, it's a few feet of buffer from the 100-year
You
floodplain.
got those garages. Okay.
Just again, for the board's benefit, we included some architectural elevations, so you can see the design. This is the north and the west elevation, and the same architectural features and elements wrap around to the south and the east. So these again are just the elevations of the other side of the building. The project also proposes a 1.2 acre conservation easement that would be preserved as open space in perpetuity. The 1.2 acres is off to the east side of the site, right here where I'm circling. It's adjacent to Krumbacke Preserve. The applicant has committed to the planning board and the village that it would work together with the village to connect either existing trails in the preserve or a new trail to the conservation easement. So the conservation easement would effectively sort of be an expansion of the preserve for public recreational hiking and walking. And again, there would be a recorded conservation easement that would be, again, recorded against the site in perpetuity, providing for that public access. The project also proposes what's called the Brandreth Pill Factory Open Air Pavilion. Again, it will be constructed and maintained by the applicant, available to the public. There will be a public easement. The public will be invited to come down and enjoy it. There will be educational signage in the pavilion that discusses the history of the pill factory. The architecture was designed to be reflective of the former pill factory and the existing office building. Here again are some other renderings of the pavilion, and in this corner here are some samples of what signage might look like both within and outside the pavilion. So let's get into the off-site road improvements. I mentioned improvements to North Water Street and the North Water Street extension. There would be 24 feet of new pavement, 2 12-foot travel lanes, a 4-foot sidewalk, curbing, drainage, and lighting. None of those improvements, the sidewalk curbing exists today. There's no sufficient stormwater out in the field. There is pavement that's in various states of disrepair. So this would be 24 feet of new pavement. So this is all within a 30-foot right-of-way. 24 feet of pavement and these other improvements. It's been designed in compliance with all fire department requirements, village code requirements. I should mention, we have met with the village fire department just a couple of weeks ago. They had a couple of technical comments, but overall, they were okay with the current design. They'll provide a final review before the building permit is issued. And these improvements, the road improvements, would facilitate safe access to all the properties along North Water Street, including Krumbacke Preserve. So this is, I guess it's tough to tell on this slide. Here's Snowden, and again, the improvements would be from Snowden all the way to the project site. This first stretch of roadway is across what's known as the village's tax lot 6. So this stretch of roadway is publicly owned. And I'm going to make distinctions between what's publicly owned and privately owned because it's going to tie into the request for the interpretation. So the portion of the road of the village's lot 6 is publicly owned public roadway. At this point here, the road starts crossing over into private properties. This is the Conga property, Castle Plumbing property as we advance north, and then ultimately into the plateau site. So here's the building. This is the road. The gray, I should mention, is existing pavement. And again, maybe tough to tell, but it's in your materials. There are red dashed lines that show the new 30-foot right-of-way. So the question before your board, with respect to Village Law 7-736 and Ossinings's comparable requirement, is whether an area variance is required because a portion of the access road is privately owned. We've had some discussions with Steve and his firm, and we have a sort of agreed to disagree on what the law provides. We think a private street can give access under Village Law 7736, not necessitating an area variance, as long as that private street is shown on the official map. So we request respectfully an interpretation that an area variance is not required. We believe the project satisfies the two-part test. North Water Street is of sufficient, again, we maintain is of sufficient legal character insofar as it's placed on the village tax map as well as the zoning map, and the applicant is clearly suitably improving North Water Street as shown on the site plans that have been pending before the planning board. Again, it's our position that it's not legally relevant, that North Water Street is privately owned. There's nothing in the case law or the statute that we're aware of that makes a distinction between a privately owned street and a publicly owned street for satisfying the first prong of the 7-736 test. We submit that this project fulfills the public policy of 7-736. The whole purpose of this statute is to make sure that before a building permit is issued, the street giving access to a lot has been reviewed by the village, sort of has the village's municipal stamp of approval, and by virtue of being placed on an official map. In contrast to if I wanted to gain access to my property through my neighbor's backyard that no one has reviewed, but me and my neighbor are working out a private easement agreement, that wouldn't satisfy the 7736 test. But a street that's privately owned, that the village has recognized as a street, again, on an official map, we submit private or public, doesn't matter, it satisfies the test. And just to avoid any doubt, I keep using the term official map because that's what the statute refers to. The case law right out of the second department is clear that for purposes of this first prong, a tax map constitutes an official map for purposes of this test. And again, we've showed before here, this is the tax map I should have mentioned. And so I can blow it up, but the words right here, North Water Street. So this is an excerpt of the village's tax map. I should submit the town's tax map, obviously, and North Water Street is shown, and the words North Water Street appear right where the cursor is. And here's the village zoning map. I highlighted in yellow where North Water Street is, the words don't appear, but there's a line, and we highlighted in yellow where North Water Street appears on the village zoning map. So, in light of all that, we submit that we don't need a variance, that we satisfy the two-part test, but in the event your board ultimately determines contrary to our position, we seek in the alternative an area variance. We've briefed for you in our submission letter the 5-factor test and why we believe we meet the 5 factors. Very quickly, no undesirable change in community character. The road is currently an active roadway, it's been active for decades. It's in disrepair, again, lacks sidewalk, curbing, and stormwater, so the improvements proposed into this project would only improve pedestrian vehicular access, would enhance, I submit, the overall character of this waterfront location, is consistent with zoning in the comprehensive plan, and it's also consistent with other land use approvals that have been approved by the village, including the 1995 Filex subdivision that created the project site that specifically provides for access over North Water Street. The second factor in the 5-factor test, no feasible alternative. Obviously, the project site is fixed, cannot be changed. The applicant, our client, cannot make use of this site without access along North Water Street, just like all the other existing businesses have been doing for decades. The third factor, substantiality. This isn't a numeric variance, so I'm not even sure substantiality really applies here. But I should mention that there's case law, and I put it in our submission letter, that under New York established case law, substantiality, even if it was deemed 100% variance somehow, it's the actual impact that's what's legally relevant. So a large variance can have little or no impact, or a very small 1% variance can have a very large impact. So substantiality is really governed by the nature of the impact, and here we submit there is none as a result of this variance. In fact, under the 4th factor, no adverse impact. It meets all fire department and village standards. It would be a new stormwater system designed in accordance with the DEC design manual. And again, the road has been reviewed multiple times by Kellard Sessions, and we think all impacts have been minimized, will be mitigated, and if anything, again, the road will only improve vehicular and pedestrian access in the area. and the hardship has not been self-created. The project site has always been located along North Water Street, and as your board knows, even if you deemed it self-created, that does not preclude the granting of the variance. So that concludes the aspect of the application with respect to the road. There's one more request for variance, and that involves the relocation of the watercourse to the north. So this is the plan that was submitted with the application. The existing watercourse is where the cursor is right here, and this is an open channel. You can see outlined in gray the footprint of the former building on the site. Once it got to this point here, the stream was then channeled below grade underneath the prior building before connecting to a culvert here and ultimately discharging into the Hudson River. So where the cursor is where the stream's located through the site and would be under the location of the footprint of the proposed building. What we're seeking to do, what the applicant is seeking to do, is to relocate the stream to the north. So at this location where the cursor is, again, this part is open, it would then go underground in a new below-grade concrete culvert in this direction along this entire leg, which this is all 25 feet from the building. Again, the requirement that's at issue here is that a watercourse must be 25 feet from a building. So in this location, it's close to the building. 25 feet along this leg complies, and then it doglegs this way, 17 feet from the proposed building, and then it connects to the same culvert and discharges to the river in the same location. So on the east side of the project, at its closest distance, the watercourse will be 3 feet from the building, and on the west side, it would be 17 feet from the building. Again, less than 25 feet, necessitating the variance. Again, we briefed the 5-factor test. First factor, no undesirable change. The existing stream was already not in compliance. Again, it was under the prior building on the site. So this proposal, relocating it to the north, would only bring the stream in greater conformance with the zoning law, and it would be located primarily underground. So, moving this watercourse to the north in a new subgrade channel would not affect community character. There is no feasible alternative. If we moved this part any further north to achieve the 25 feet separation, we would be further into steep slopes in this area. So we've looked at it, but it's been designed in such a way as to minimize and reduce impacts. So we submit there's no feasible alternative. In terms of substantiality, again, it ranges from a 28% variance to 88%, given the varying distances on the east and west side. Should mention only 83 feet of the entire culvert, which is 520 feet, would be closer than the 25 feet. So the vast majority of this culvert would comply with the zoning requirement. Only 83 feet would not be in compliance. And again, even though 88% may sound like a high number, substantiality, the board is required legally to evaluate the impact of the requested variance, and we submit that there would be no adverse impact. The culvert would be used to manage the 100-year off-site stormwater flows, and again, it would be the same discharge point into the Hudson River. And again, Keller Sessions has reviewed it. We've addressed comments regarding the culvert, including during construction, mitigated all impacts, and we think we've demonstrated no adverse impact on the environment. And again, we submit that hardship is not self-created. The open channel portions currently exist. And all we're doing is we're transitioning the watercourse to a new location to the north, and then right back into the existing discharge point. So that concludes my presentation. The next steps would be to continue the discussion on September 12th, which is your board's next meeting as appropriate. And then, as I mentioned earlier, ultimately your board would vote or consider voting on the application after SEQR is completed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Very good.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Stephen Rabel. I'm the law firm of McCulloch, Goldberger, and Stout. So I think Brad did a very good job of giving the board an overview of the project and the questions that are before the board. I know this is really more of an introduction to the project, and since I'm here on behalf of the village, really.
Well, I think that it's important that everybody understand that you're the council for the village instead of corporation council.
Special counsel.
Special counsel, and have been for quite a while.
On this project.
On this
Correct.
project only, yes.
Correct. So I guess my question to you is, would you like a bit of an overview as to our opinion on matters? Do you have specific questions you'd like me to address? I'm here for you.
I don't know if anybody has any specific questions right this second, but I just wanted everyone to meet the players, let's call it, right?
Well, I actually do have a specific
Oh, great,
question.
I'm glad you do.
No, the gentleman mentioned that it will have no adverse impact on the environment. I'd like to know, was there a study made as to the impact that it's going to have on the environment?
So, just to clarify my role here, I'm really here on the question of the interpretation. You have your normal counsel as to environmental impacts, you have your planning consultant. We're here because a unique question has been raised on this issue as to whether or not an area variance is needed from 7736. As Brad indicated, we have agreed to disagree. Our opinion, which we advise the planning board, is that an area variance is required. If you'd like, I can speak to that or provide our opinions in writing. But when it comes to balances, the 5-factor test, or whether or not a variance should be granted, that's really not what we're here to advise on.
Marcel, maybe I can help you out with that just a little bit. Two things. One, the planning board, and this is something that Steve and Jim Stout have been very important, is in the process of going through the final supplemental environmental impact statement. Okay, that is not yet finalized. There will be a finding statement that will be prepared and approved by the planning board with regard to whatever the impacts are. This project has already been reviewed by the Environmental Advisory Council. They have given recommendations to the planning board. They have found that it is consistent with the local waterfront redevelopment plan, but that they did make other suggestions with regard to the particular program, and those have been submitted to the planning board, I think at the last meeting, if I'm not mistaken, was when they did that. So from the perspective of environmental impacts, that's something that the entire, environmental impact statement, they've been doing now for a number of months. We've had, as Brad pointed out, I believe 3 public hearings going back to June. We're continuing in August. That's been in conjunction with the site plan review at the same time. So those issues are coming up. We had a work session with the planning board on August the 9th, where it was essentially devoted to just going through the environmental impact statement page by page and making particular positions, because that document is in fact the planning board's document, which is effectively the village's document. So we want to make clear that that's what their position is as to whatever they think impacts are, whatever they think issues are. So that's the document that's currently being, prepared, and it has been going through the process in that regard.
Okay.
May I continue?
Absolutely.
I'd like to know the village's position on whether or not they need a variance or not.
So what we've advised the planning board at least, and ultimately what you're here for is to determine the village's position as to whether or not an area variance is required. So our position, looking at the law and at the history of the site, is that a variance is required under Village Law 7736, which requires that if you're constructing a new building, access must be provided on a street that's either mapped on the official village map or is shown on a subdivision plat approved by the planning board, or one that was approved prior to the planning board's existence. Not the case here. So we took a look at it, and I think Brad even noted in his presentation, if you were to provide access strictly through easement agreements, that would not be adequate for 7736. And when we're talking about what's known as the North Water Street extension, we believe that this is really a right-of-way created by a series of easement agreements. And I know he included an excerpt of the tax map in the presentation that couldn't be blown up. If you do go online, if you take a look, if you zoom in, what you're going to see is that North Water Street does in fact end, and that it's not provided for as a road. What we also took a look at was, well, what does it mean to be the official village map? And that's governed by Village Law, section 7724. And what that speaks to is the official map certified as such by the Board of Trustees and filed with the county clerk. Any amendments to it also have to be done by public hearing with the Board of Trustees, with the county clerk. And it talks about dictating things like drainage, parks. Based on our reading of 7724, it doesn't appear to us that the village tax map really meets what's being contemplated by New York State village law as the official tax map. Now, it could be that there is a record saying we've certified this with the county clerk as the official map pursuant to 7724. It could be that North Water Street Extension was added to that map by a public hearing with the Board of Trustees, and that was filed, but I haven't seen a record of that. So it's really our opinion that this doesn't quite meet the standards to say it satisfies 7736. Not to say that a variance shouldn't be granted.
I'm sorry, let me interject. So where did he get that interpretation from regarding the tax map, that it's an official map?
I believe that's his contention. I think he also cited 2 cases, which we differ on the interpretation of.
Recent cases or older cases?
One was 2011 and one was
recent.
2007.
The 2007 one involved U Water.
Oh, that's pretty recent. 2011 is pretty recent. Okay.
Right, so we did take a look at the cases. Those both involved denials. I don't know how into the case law you'd like us to get at this juncture.
As much as you think is necessary.
Yeah, I think I'd rather submit our thoughts in writing than go off the cuff, given that this is more of an introductory meeting.
Right.
And again, this is not to say that a variance should or shouldn't be granted. It's just our interpretation based on the relevant facts and the language of the New York State Village law that procedurally a variance would be required. Now, you, as a board, certainly can disagree with us. That's.
But I think we do need to see it in writing so that, you know, you can have all your
Sure.
thoughts, you know, all of the
Okay.
opinions, okay? All right? Board? Myself? Okay, it's writing, so. Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Can I quickly address?
Good.
Quick?
Quick.
So just to clarify, those 2 recent cases, just to answer your question, yes, they did both involve denials, as Mr. Rabel mentioned,
Yes.
but they still were analyzing the tax map for purposes of compliance with the village law section. So as a threshold issue, the second department was looking at the tax map to see whether or not the proposed access road was a street on the tax map. In both of those instances, it was labeled as a right-of-way. The citing case out of this village was Woolsey Lane. If you look at the tax map, the words Woolsey does not appear. What appears is right-of-way. In contrast, North Water Street doesn't say right-of-way. The town tax map says North Water Street. So where do we get the official status? Is by virtue of the fact that 2 second department cases of recent vintage was looking at a tax map for purposes of analyzing compliance with that section.
So, is that it all in the documentation that you have given us already?
It is, so with that hint, I will sit down.
Thank you. So this is not a public hearing, but I know that some people came here tonight because they were notified as a public hearing for this particular property. Is there anyone that wants to speak tonight? Because we want to give you the opportunity. And, you know, right?
Yeah,
So should
that's
we
fine.
open a public hearing then? Or,
We can at least allow for the public to speak tonight. Would that
okay,
be a
let's
formal
do that as
public
a,
hearing? You
let's
can
do that as a, yeah.
As a courtesy.
Yes, sir.
Just a general.
Come up to the mic.
I'm sorry, excuse me. Miguel Hernandez, 10 North Water Street. I believe it says North Water Street Extension, so I don't know street extension, but yeah, we can get into that. But anyway, I have a very general question, and excuse me, I'm sorry, this might not be the appropriate forum for this, but just a general question. It's my understanding that this particular body of water is tidal, because it empties out into the Hudson, and, you know, the water goes both ways, as they say. So I'm wondering if this is something that might require the approval of the Army Corps of Engineers or another federal agency that might be involved in this, if you change the course of the stream. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do know that there have been contacts between the applicant and the ACOE. So that's.
Which is the Army Corps.
Army Corps of Engineers, I apologize. And so that's been going on. Brad, if you have anything more with regard to that.
A general permit is required, we met with.
Thank you, sir.
A general permit is required, we met with the Army Corps, and that's being addressed.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Sure.
Peggy Wonderlick, 8 North Water Street. So I guess I'm a little confused and concerned when you say Snowden to North Water. That's, our access to our houses basically goes by Varium and then goes up those driveways. So when you say that this is starting at Snowden and then moving to North Water, I'm just concerned about, is this going to impact our access?
I'm sorry, your home is where?
So our home is a Brandreth home that is behind the condo going up those winding driveways.
Right, that's not the road that we're.
You're not going up the
That's-
driveways,
We're not
but
going up that
but you are, but what they do is to get to their homes, they go past the Valerium, and then you'll see those driveways go up,
So
right?
the road that we're improving, it's called like the lower road along.
So it's where
along
those
this way.
buildings, where
Right,
those,
The industrial properties are.
The industrial
It's not by the
properties are
residential
now.
So
property.
you would be improving the extension,
Exactly.
not North Water Street. So your improvement
Yes.
would start at the end of North Water Street and go on the extension.
Our improvement starts
oh, I hope they
here, starts here,
Okay.
and
So
then.
you would be improving it through North Water and then onto the extension?
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess I was confused because you did mention Snowden, and I don't see how you can mention Snowden without cutting across our access. And that's why, do you want to explain why Snowden?
Again, I'm just showing, I mentioned something, this is where, maybe it's Water Street, this is where the roadway improvements begin. That's all I was trying to indicate.
Okay, and where's Varium on this map?
Right at the bottom, right there.
So you're saying that the roadway improvements would start at Snowden, but would not affect their driveways? Is that what you're saying, sir?
Correct.
That's not possible. I'm sorry, I mean, it's not possible for you to, Snowden is here. You are talking about cutting across from Snowden. When you cut across, you're going to impact our access. And that's a problem, basically.
So it's something that we will look at. Yes, sir.
Hi, Nick Stolatis with Plateau Associates. If I may respond to Ms. Wunderlich's concerns. The improvement on the roadway, that portion of the roadway has a sidewalk, has pavement. The improvements will be more cosmetic. There'll be no impact whatsoever to the access of either of the two homes going up, nor to Mr. Hernandez's easement across the other properties to get to his house. Those will be unaffected. The improvements will enhance the point beyond where there are no sidewalks, there are no pavement markings, and the asphalt, as Mr. Schwartz has indicated, is in extreme disrepair and improvement, so there'll be no impact whatsoever.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak on 36 Water Street? Sorry, 36 North.
Yeah, would be.
You're gonna get technical.
Yeah, got it.
Thank you. And so there's no action to be taken tonight, so that was an introduction that I thought this board needed. Someone said, I heard someone say before, this has been before this board. This is a very new zoning board. So the individuals, the zoning board existed, it was just not anybody that's sitting at this table. Our one member that's missing was probably here through, well, I know he was here through the whole thing, but.
You already built Sing Sing, what do you think?
Thank you very much. Now, moving on. Whew. ZBA 19-18, 228 North Highland Avenue. Applicant is seeking a variance to convert a single-family house into a mixed-use building. This is a use variance we're looking for.
Just getting a flash.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night, thank you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Susan Reardon, the architect. And I'm Vivian Lozano, house owner. Yeah, Vivian's the owner. I just want to start with 228 North Highland Avenue is between.
Can you hear her?
No.
Okay, is it turned on? Susan talks very softly.
Yeah, it's on.
Just gotta get a little tiny bit closer.
Hello. Hello?
Got it.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right, so let me just do this. Okay, so this building was originally built in 1924 as a single-family house. Since then, 7-Eleven moved next door. On the other side is a bunch of stores. So the owner has purchased this house with the plan of putting an office in the front for her accounting firm, and then turning the back into residential and including the second floor. Now, I know that you're not allowed to have both of them on the same floor. This particular property is up on a hill, so you're really not going to, it's not down at the street level, it's up on a hill. So you really won't, perceive that. The entrance is in the back for the resident, it's in the front for the office. The owner has given some financial information showing how difficult it would be. The upstairs is small. If we had to, renovate the upstairs to create a second floor, to put the entire apartment up there. And she's shown other information just showing the rents for residential versus an office, which residential obviously gets more than an office. But she would like this office in the front for her business. Let's see, anything else? Also, we wanted to put parking in the front, but it's not in front of the house, it's down a level. So when the cars are parked, you can still see the whole house. But we need 2 extra spaces, and we want to keep the garage for the residential, and then have the parking for the business. On either side is 7-Eleven, and this business where all the parking is right on Route 9 anyway. So, but we're just going to keep the driveway, and then you're just going to turn into the parking spot, which will be below the residence.
Susan, can I just ask you something?
Yes.
I know the application here, I think, is for a use variance. Are you looking for anything from this board with relation to the parking, or is that something you're going to present to planning? Because I mean, so far I'm just seeing that, right, I think this was just for a use variance for this one.
Right, so, yeah, well, mainly
So you wanna park in the front yard, one of your favorite things.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if you, because that's not referenced on the application, that's what.
So all we're really addressing now
Would
is
be
the
the
use
use.
variance, which is very difficult
Right.
to achieve.
So I know the owner has talked to realtors, and has gone over the cost of renting it, renting.
Right.
You discussed it,
yeah,
yeah, because
just-
you remember.
Yeah, just because like the house, how we set up, like they have the kitchen and the bathroom on the first floor. And if you go upstairs, it's only like 1 bathroom and like the stairs going up. So in order for me to move, like build a kitchen and a bathroom or in a bathroom upstairs, it will not be cost effective for me, which I don't really need the whole space. I will be just using like the front part, which is like the living room, like much as of now is the living room. So, I mean so that's the main idea, just using like the front part of the house to like my small office with like a reception area, and just keep it separate from the residential So the residential part will just be the kitchen, bathroom, and I think like a small living room that will be downstairs. And the bathroom will be upstairs.
Yes, that is, it's a bedroom upstairs.
When did you buy the house?
We closed October of last year.
And did you buy it as a single-family house?
Yes, I did. I just like the area because everything is commercial on that same road, and it's like a, I think it's under commercial.
Yeah, it's a
Code.
NC1 zone, so,
Right.
yeah. So commercial is allowed as
So,
well.
so really, the use variance is that part of the apartment on the first floor, which is not normally acceptable.
Correct.
Under the code, under the code. So, a use variance involves,
As we discussed on other cases, use variance, you have four different issues, both under the village law, and New York village law, and under our own code in section 270-48. And as this board knows, generally use variances are disfavored because they are viewed as outside what is in fact a particular use in the area. The point though, just to note here, it's a little bit a twist on it because the NC does permit as a conditional use residential. What's being asked for here is the ability to have residential on the first floor, and that's given the size of the house. So the fact the residential itself is not the use variance, which the use variance is being on the first floor, or because
with a
first-
business.
with a business, that's right. Well, being on the first floor at all, but if they would have, but having the business, that's right. Because in the NC1, you're certainly allowed to have the business, and as pointed out, you have the 7-Eleven on one side, you have Tony Shoe
Butler.
Repair and everything on the other side, and you have various businesses on both that go throughout there. But the elements for the use variance would be that the applicant cannot realize a reasonable return provided the lack of return is substantial, as demonstrated by competent financial evidence. We do have, and I believe, Ms. Lozano, you submitted this stuff.
Yes, I
And we have some information from Ms. Lozano dealing with the cost of what would be the renovation, the return on the various rents for both commercial as well as residential, and the use of the different spaces within that building. Next would be whether the alleged hardship relating to the property in question is unique and does not apply to a substantial portion of the district or neighborhood. Again, this is a single-family home, and if you're familiar with it, it's sort of like the only single-family home that's there within that particular area. The requested use variance if granted will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Again, you do have commercial there. The issue here is, would you be willing to have residential, which would be in the rear of the particular first floor? It would not be in the front, and I believe, Susan, you have that the entrance and exit would be through there'd be a separate entrances would be required under our code anyway. And then that the alleged hardship has not been self-created. The only issue there is that it was purchased as a single family back in, as Ms. Lozano said, in 2017 from the Caetano estate. So those are the various elements, but we do have financial information that was provided by the applicant here. There are photos obviously provided of the house. There are some designs here. My understanding is that the applicant, you will not be living in this house, because you already live somewhere else in Austin, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, so it's gonna be a rental unit?
It's my father-in-law is
Oh,
currently
your
living
father,
there.
oh, family. You know, go ahead.
Is that just one apartment, Stuart, or?
So I think it's
It's
just one
only one
apartment.
bedroom.
One apartment.
One apartment, one bedroom, one apartment.
The tiny house.
Yeah, it's a tiny house, yeah. Bedroom upstairs, bath.
See, a lot of
kitchen,
times you
downstairs.
worry about how will this set the example for the future, and how, if you do a use variance, so, and I think this is a pretty unique situation.
One of the questions that Tracy had is, will your father-in-law have any ownership interest, or is this going to stay with just you and your
No,
husband?
it's just my husband.
Stuart, can you tell us one more time what financial information?
Sure. What they provided, Greg, or what Ms. Lozano provided, was a couple of different things. First, she went over renovation costs, and basically she was trying to calculate what would be required if they had to do the structural work to fit the second floor, to put it up there. And those costs would be approximately $100,000, labor and materials, just to essentially go from having a commercial downstairs to going upstairs in the house. Because if one were to look at photos, and I think they're in your various books, and we have some here, you'll see it's a tiny house. It's simple as that. They went over, then, Greg, there's a description here of return on rents in terms of both residential rent versus commercial rent. There would be a greater benefit here to the residential because there's a great demand, particularly it would be a one-bedroom, wouldn't be a studio. I think, in fact, it's going to go up to 705 square feet as compared to the 600, which is the minimum that would be permitted within the NC zone. And there's a calculation here of what different, rates would be brought in here. And then there's a description here, Greg, by the applicant as to essentially what the cost would be if they were to just build it on the second floor and keep the rest as commercial. And effectively, it would be cost prohibitive for them to do that. So this way it would allow them to essentially split the first floor, have the commercial in the front, could be some small business or something like that, and then have the residential in the back with the entrance through the back also into the small area on the second floor, because the plans indicate that that's how that would be, how it would be laid out. So it is unique in that sense that we permit residential, we just don't permit residential on a first floor where there's a business. But again, if you're familiar with that stretch of North Highland, you got a lot of businesses around there. And this is again up a hill, and so the residential would actually be going out towards the back where is more residential in that location.
Thank you.
Got it.
Yeah, the house is on a hill, so that,
Not that one.
a bit of a hill, a slope.
And how would this affect other areas where this zone, when someone else comes in front of us? This is my concern, and this is what a use variance, why it's so
That's
difficult
correct.
to get a use variance.
We had this before when we were talking about with the laundromat,
Right.
previously on Spring Street. There is always the issue that the board, and it is a factor that the board can consider, although not within these elements, is the future effect that this decision would have on similar applicants coming in. And obviously you have to take applications case by case, but if someone were to similarly come in who is in the NC 1 or 2 zone and wants to do that, because we have a number of zones in the village where we cannot have, residential on the first or below ground level. So it would have to be viewed. I just think that given where this particular location is, it creates a situation that's different than other ones.
Can we put that into the resolution?
We can certainly indicate that the location and the placement of this particular house distinguishes it from other areas, so that if someone were to look at this decision in the future and try to come back to it, it can distinguish itself. Yes.
Does anybody have any more questions? Is there anyone here that wants to speak on 228 North Highland Avenue? Seeing no one, do I have can I have someone make a motion to close the public hearing?
Make a motion, we close the public hearing?
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
What was that?
No, we're fine. So
Okay.
we just need a motion.
Okay. This is a very unique situation. We do not give use variances out very often at all, if ever. But looking at this particular situation, I'd like to hear what you feel about this particular one, putting a small office in the front. And
I'm not objecting.
For me, a use variance is a very high standard, and I don't think we have enough information to convince me that we're at that point to grant it, so I'm a no over again.
As Stuart was saying, we grant this, we're setting a precedence. And I think we really need to have, as Greg said, more information to really make a decision on this.
so we're going to ask you, instead of us taking a vote, go out back and get some more financial, solid information on this particular situation. Okay? So we'll adjourn this.
Ms. Lozano, I'll be in touch with you, so we can, and Susan, so we can do that, okay?
Okay,
We'll
great.
put it on for the September meeting.
Okay?
Great.
Thank you very much. ZBA 1618, 1 Martin Road.
Hello.
How are you?
Hi.
And your name?
Jessica Alter, owner of 1 Martin Road.
You promise to tell the
I
truth?
will tell the truth, yes. So we are requesting an area variance to expand our existing driveway because we're in a corner lot. The driveway, both the Martin Road, which faces the front of the house, and Route 9 faces the side of the house, both sides of the house are front yards.
Do we have pictures of this? So we can put it on the
Yes.
screen?
Hang
You
on.
just have to go back.
Click out with what?
Am I
Click out?
No, no, you don't do anything.
I was gonna close this.
Yes.
And go to the folder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that
Arrow
so?
back. There you
There
go.
you go.
There we go. That is not.
That's what it used to look like. There we
Is this the one?
go. No, that's
Nope, that's the old one.
There you go.
Okay, there we
So
go.
are you on a stop work order?
So, yes. So yes, this work was begun by our contractor before we realized the situation. He got as far as making the cutout and laying down gravel, as you can see. I am not close enough to the computer to rotate this image. But essentially, we are expanding the width of the driveway. So,
Want me to help
if you know the shortcut, please be my guest.
Just go to view.
Oh, there it is. No.
Yeah,
Just keep
Okay.
going,
Keep going, keep
just keep
going.
going.
Yeah,
you'll be fine.
exactly. 2 more and we'll be there.
Yeah, exactly. We have it in our.
There you go.
Beautiful. Okay. So as you can see, the original driveway came from the retaining wall on the right side of the picture, 1 car width over. Our intention was to expand the driveway to allow 2 cars to park side by side and 3 cars total, so expanding the total off-street parking by 1. We had to stop work due to the discovery that we needed an area variance in order to place the driveway in the front yard, which is both sides of the house, as well as the
In the front yard.
leftmost cutout, which is in the village right-of-way.
That might be your problem more than the, in front of the house.
Yeah.
So
And
we
I'll deal
have-
with that in a second.
Yeah.
after this.
Right, so I think we've already addressed that with you, but it's contingent on the board's approval of the
Right,
area
right.
variance.
So do you have a front door on
The
North
front-
Island or?
No,
South
the front door faces Martin Road.
Right,
The
that's the front
retaining
door,
wall,
right?
that is the picture of the front door with the
Right.
oval, yes, oops, sorry.
So I'm not sure about the front yard
I believe it's because there's not a house there, there's a street there, so it's considered a front yard, even though it is on the side of the house, is my understanding of this.
Well, in your front yard, to us is in front of your front door. Yeah,
That
okay.
part of it is,
Yeah,
yeah.
I get it.
So that's
Okay.
my understanding, and that's what we're
So
asking
this is
to
what,
complete.
this is what you ultimately want the whole thing to look like at the end of the day?
Well, paved, but yes.
Yes, yeah, yeah. But that's just the extent of your, you don't want to push it all the
We're
way
not
out
going
to
any
the-
further, we're not changing the curb cutout. It's hard to see from this angle, but it sort of goes, there's a curb cutout that's about 1 car width wide, and it sort of bulges out to the side to allow 2 cars side by side and then 1 more behind.
Oh, yeah, we see the curb cut
Mhm.
out. Okay. And so you're here for the variances?
They're here for the variance, and I've been in touch with Mr. Alter on a number of things. Initially, there was a concern that this was also a state right-of-way,
Okay.
because we do have Route 9 right there. But the state DOT advised that it is not a state right-of-way. It is, however, village right-of-way, because if you were to look at the survey, the village property does sort of, it does sort of cut across. So any
Well,
variance.
isn't it also just with, I don't know where it went to now, but,
Do you wanna go back to the picture? Sorry, I was
stone
going to
wall,
circle.
yeah,
Yeah.
you just put it back.
Okay.
The stone wall that to the street is
Right.
is a village
Yeah,
right
if
of
you
way.
were to look at the survey, you could see how it actually cuts across.
Right.
So this board, some of the board may recall, we had this last year with Bellevue, with a
Right.
similar situation. And what I have prepared for the alters is a license agreement, which, in fact, will be presented to the Board of Trustees tomorrow night, which will be a license agreement to effectively allow the alters to traverse the village's right-of-way, but giving the village the ability to go in if they have to make any changes, if they have to change, if they have to take part of the stone wall down or anything like that to be done. And so whatever variance this board would grant would obviously only be with regard to the altar's own property, not across the village's property, which would be the subject of the agreement that the village is going to reach with them.
Is there anyone here that wants to speak on 1 Martin Road? Not seeing anyone. Does I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close public hearing?
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Comments from the board? Any comments? Pretty easy one. Yeah, it's reasonable. Yeah. Fort Taconic Paving, you had to give them bad.
We took the sign down after.
Mention the
Do I have a, again, Stuart, just go through what the variances that they're, the exact variance that they're looking from this board.
Okay, sure. From this board, and I'll go through that right here. And Brian, if I'm making a mistake, please help me out with this. They are looking to, they're looking to add 1 parking space in the front pursuant to 270-30, looks like A5. And as they write in their application, we, the owners, wish to expand the width of our existing driveway. Due to the location of 1 Martin Road on a corner lot, the driveway is currently located in the front yard. There are no side yards exist at this location which can accommodate off-street parking. So what they're effectively looking to do is to get it so they can get another car in there.
Right.
And that would be the variance that they're seeking from this board.
Do I have a motion to grant the variance?
Make a motion, we grant the variance?
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, moving on. ZBA 17-18, 3 Fuller Road. Applicant is seeking an area variance to legalize an existing deck.
Hello, I'm back again, it's Susan Reardon.
Oh my gosh, it's Susan.
And the owner, Joan Savino, she's trying to sell her house.
I do have buyers.
Good.
They're waiting.
They're waiting, okay. That's probably the reason we're having this meeting.
Yes, exactly.
Could we see that up on the screen?
Okay, so these houses were built in 1963. The house next door, same, there are a couple other houses in the neighborhood. They had these decks next to them that were built, I guess probably as an add-on. And the owner, this current owner, bought the house with the deck already there. She wasn't aware that it needed a variance at that point, which was about 1979. So it was not self-created. So we're requesting basically side yard variances because the lot is 50 feet wide. You've got a house, you've got these decks. We have basically 1'8" to the property line where 8 is required, and 7.5 for both where 18 is required. So these houses have been in place since 1963, so nothing's going to change the house, for sure. Yeah, and on the street, on Fuller, there's a lot of side yard decks. I guess that's because where the kitchens are. And so that's a typical typical site on that street, so it's not unusual.
Okay. The house next door has one too.
Yeah.
They're just looking for a variance to legalize the deck, to move on.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so you want to just go over the variances?
Yeah.
They need 3 variances.
There are 3 variances that are being requested here. The first is front yard. They're looking for a variance of 1.5 feet. The requirement is 30 feet, the existing condition is 28.5. They need a one side yard variance, the requirement is 8 feet, the existing condition is 1.8, so they're looking for 6.2. And for both side yards combined, the minimum is 18 feet, they have 10.5, so they're looking for a variance there of 7.5 feet. So it's just those 3 variances that are being requested.
Okay, is there anyone here that's here to speak on 3 Fuller? Yeah, it's scaring me. We have nothing left on them. Okay. So, okay. We're done. Okay, so do I have a motion to close the public hearing on 3 Fuller?
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any discussion on the board?
Well, it seems pretty consistent with the neighborhood.
It does, doesn't it? I have a motion to grant the 3 variances for 3 Fuller.
Motion to grant the variances for 3 Fuller.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you.
Just, we have 3 people still in our audience. I'm a little, oh, maybe 2 now. Oh, that's the gentleman. Can we ask, I hope we didn't leave some, you just wanted to come and visit? Oh, excellent. We love having company. Because we've had that happen before, where people think that we're in the wrong place. Have a wonderful evening, folks.
Thank you.
Okay, the last item on our agenda tonight was the approval of the minutes and resolutions from the July 10th, 2018 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting, the minutes and the resolutions for the July 10th, 2018 meeting?
Motion to approve?
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So our next meeting in September is September 12th, which is a Wednesday, for a multitude of reasons that we're not meeting on 9/11. It's a holiday.
The holiday.
Yeah, and it's not. So we may, we'll see you back here in September. I'm not gonna say as long as we have cases, 'cause we did that the last time. And have a wonderful month, and.
Just wanted to ask Stuart
Yes.
something.
Yes.
Stuart, can you forward us the cases, the case law?
Absolutely.
Only 2 cases.
No, whatever he cited in those papers, I'll download and I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
Easy.
To go back onto that other one from.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
not a problem, I'll
And
send them
that's,
over.
and that's part of this whole discussion, that's why we wanted to have the introductory meeting too, so that, you know, if you read the letter, when you read the letter, I know you did already, but it states that you guys should be all familiar with this already, and we were not familiar with it, because I'm probably the most familiar with the whole
Right.
Plateau Brothers, but, you know, and maybe Bob because of the fire department, but.
Well, I have
you
a
know.
question. He made a statement that he had spoke with the fire department, that very well may be true, I don't know.
Right.
But the 24-foot width of the road, I believe it's 26 if it's only one way in.
I'm gonna leave it up to Mike.
Yes, and that was brought up at the meeting with the fire chiefs, and he was just talking about the 2-way road. That'll
Right.
be for access, but around the building, you have the 26 min in front of the building for the apparatus.
Okay.
And the
Just
chiefs were-
24 stuck him.
Right.
Hit me, and I said, I'm not gonna delay this
That,
anymore.
as soon as that 24 gets up to their parking lot,
Right.
it fans out.
So have a wonderful month, and the zoning board will see you next month. Thanks. Good night.
Thank you.